There is a moment, usually somewhere in the 50s, when the body begins speaking a language we realize we never fully learned. A stiffness in the morning that lingers longer than it used to. A knee that comments on the weather before the forecast does. A subtle awareness that the physical self we have always taken for granted is now asking for something different. Most of us respond by trying to silence the conversation. We reach for something to dull the ache. We avoid the movements that trigger discomfort. We tell ourselves this is simply what aging means. But what if the body is not complaining? What if it is communicating? What if the ache is not the problem, but the clue? And the real mistake is treating the message as the enemy rather than learning to read what it contains. There is a reason pain appears where it appears. A logic to why certain movements become difficult while others remain easy. That logic, once understood, transforms the entire experience of growing older from a slow surrender into something far more interesting. You are listening to the Longevity Library, where we archive the wisdom of healthy aging. The wisdom of the body. Understanding health through the lens of time. There comes a moment in life when the body begins to speak in a different language. It is not the urgent language of youth, with its sudden injuries and quick recoveries. Its ability to bounce back from almost anything overnight. It is a quieter, more deliberate language. A language of small signals. A creak here, a stiffness there. A joint that feels different in the morning than it does by afternoon. A slow awareness that the body has been here before, that it remembers every decade, every injury, every long day on the feet, and that it is now communicating with us in a voice we must learn to understand. For those who have reached their 50s and beyond, this shift in the body's conversation is not a sign of decline. It is an invitation to listen more carefully. The body has spent decades adapting, compensating, and carrying us forward. Now it asks for something different. Not less attention, but more refined attention. Not less movement, but more intelligent movement. Not fewer years, but a deeper understanding of what those years require. This is not a guide to reversing aging. It is not a collection of rules or prescriptions. It is an exploration of what the longest-lived peoples throughout history have understood intuitively, and what modern science is now confirming through careful observation. It is a look at how the body ages, how it communicates its needs, and how we can respond with wisdom rather than fear. Part 1. The body's signals are not the enemy. When pain appears in a joint, the immediate impulse is often to see it as an enemy. Something has gone wrong. Something must be fixed, silenced, eliminated. But this view misunderstands the nature of the body's communication system. Pain is not the problem. Pain is the signal that there is a problem. And like any signal, it carries information. The knee, for example, is remarkably specific in how it communicates. Pain under the kneecap that worsens when climbing stairs or rising from a chair is telling a different story than pain on the inner side of the joint that appears after a long walk. Pain that is sharp and localized to one spot is speaking a different language than pain that spreads across the entire joint and varies with the weather. These are not random messages. They are precise indicators of which structures are under stress and what kind of stress they are under. Learning to read these signals does not require a medical degree. It requires observation and patience. It requires asking simple questions. When does this hurt? What makes it better? What movements bring it on? The answers to these questions, tracked over days and weeks, reveal patterns. And patterns are the foundation of understanding. The temptation, particularly in a culture that values quick fixes, is to silence the signal rather than interpret it. A pill for the pain, an injection to numb the sensation, a decision to simply stop doing the things that cause discomfort. But silencing the signal does not address the underlying condition. It merely turns down the volume on a message that may be important. The body is not trying to punish us. It is trying to tell us something about how we are using it, about what it needs, about the limits it has reached and the support it requires. This perspective shift, from seeing pain as enemy to seeing pain as information, is perhaps the most fundamental step in aging well. It replaces frustration with curiosity. It replaces fear with attention. It transforms the relationship with the body from one of conflict to one of cooperation. Part 2. The architecture of a lifetime. To understand why the body changes with age, it helps to understand what the body actually is. Not in the abstract, not as a machine, but as a living system that has been in continuous operation for decades. The human body is not built to last forever. It is built to last long enough. Evolution cares about reproduction and the survival of offspring, not about maintaining perfect function for a century. And so the body is designed with a certain amount of redundancy, a certain margin for error. But it is also designed with the understanding that parts will wear, systems will slow, and eventually, the whole will wind down. This is not a design flaw. It is simply the nature of any complex system that operates over time. The joints, with their smooth cartilage surfaces, are subjected to millions of cycles of loading and unloading. The cartilage itself has no blood supply. It receives nutrition through the movement of fluid as the joint compresses and releases. This is an elegant solution, but it means that cartilage has limited capacity for repair. Once the surface begins to roughen, once the collagen network begins to break down, the joint enters a different phase of its existence. The muscles, too, change with time. After about the age of 30, humans begin to lose muscle mass at a slow but steady rate if they do not actively work to maintain it. This process, known as sarcopenia, is not inevitable in the sense that it must happen to everyone to the same degree. It is inevitable only in the sense that the underlying biology trends toward loss unless countermeasures are applied. The body becomes less efficient at building and retaining muscle protein. The signals that tell muscles to grow become weaker. The balance shifts from construction toward maintenance, and then from maintenance toward gradual decline. The bones, which seem so solid and permanent, are actually living tissue in constant flux. They are broken down and rebuilt in a continuous process called remodeling. With age, the balance of this process can shift. More bone may be broken down than rebuilt. The internal architecture becomes less dense, more porous. This does not necessarily mean fracture is inevitable, but it does mean that the margin of safety narrows. What was once a harmless fall becomes a risk. What was once a minor impact becomes a concern. The ligaments and tendons, the connective tissues that hold the skeleton together and transmit the forces of muscle to bone, also change. They become less elastic, more stiff. They lose some of their water content. They are more easily irritated by repetitive stress. The Achilles tendon that was forgiving in the 30s becomes less so in the 50s. The rotator cuff that handled years of overhead work begins to complain. None of this is meant to sound dire. It is simply the reality of a body that has been in use. Every system, every tissue, every cell has been working continuously for decades. They have been exposed to the stresses of daily life, to the environment, to the choices made about food and activity and rest. They have adapted as best they could. Now they are asking for something different. Not less use, but wiser use. Not less demand, but more appropriate demand. Part 3. The information in location. There is a reason that certain knee problems produce pain in certain locations. The body is anatomically consistent. The same structures exist in roughly the same places in nearly everyone. And when those structures are stressed, they produce pain in predictable patterns. Pain at the front of the knee, under or around the kneecap, is among the most common complaints in people over 50. It tends to appear with activities that load the knee in a bent position. Stairs are a classic trigger, particularly going down them. Squatting, even to a modest depth, can bring it on. Prolonged sitting with the knees bent, such as in a movie theater or on a long car ride, may lead to stiffness and discomfort upon standing. This pattern points to the relationship between the kneecap and the thigh bone behind it. The kneecap is not fixed in place. It glides up and down in a groove as the knee bends and straightens. For the joint to work smoothly, the kneecap must track precisely through that groove. When the tracking is off, when the muscles that control the kneecap are weak or imbalanced, pressure increases on the underlying surfaces. The result is irritation, inflammation, and pain. The muscles that control the kneecap are primarily the quadriceps, the large muscles on the front of the thigh. But not all parts of the quadriceps are equal. The inner portion, the teardrop-shaped muscle just above the inner knee, is particularly important for keeping the kneecap centered. When this muscle is weak, the kneecap can drift slightly outward, increasing pressure on the outer side of the joint. The pain may be felt under the kneecap itself, but the cause is in the muscle above. Pain just below the kneecap, particularly when it worsens with full straightening of the leg, points to a different structure. The infrapatellar fat pad sits in the space just behind the patellar tendon, cushioning the joint and distributing pressure. When this fat pad becomes irritated, often from repetitive compression or from a change in mechanics, it produces pain in a very specific location. The key test is full extension, straightening the knee completely. Locking it back should not be painful in a healthy knee. When it is, the fat pad may be involved. Pain in the tendon itself, running from the bottom of the kneecap to the bump on the shin bone, suggests tendinopathy. This is not necessarily inflammation in the classic sense. Tendons often undergo degenerative changes over time, with microscopic damage accumulating faster than the body can repair it. The tendon becomes thickened, painful to touch, and sensitive to loading. This is not an injury that happened in a single moment. It is an injury that happened over months or years, a gradual breakdown of tissue under repeated stress. Pain on the inner side of the knee requires further localization. If the pain is right on the joint line, at the level of the gap between the bones, a meniscus problem is possible. The meniscus is a wedge of cartilage that sits between the thigh bone and shin bone, deepening the joint and absorbing shock. With age, the meniscus becomes more brittle, more prone to tearing. A tear may produce sharp pain with twisting movements, or a sensation of catching or locking. The knee may feel unstable, as if it might give way. If the inner knee pain is more diffuse, spread over a broader area, and accompanied by morning stiffness or weather sensitivity, arthritis is more likely. The cartilage that covers the ends of the bones has worn thin in places. The joint space has narrowed. The bones themselves may be rubbing against each other in ways they were not designed to. This produces a dull, aching pain that can be difficult to pinpoint but impossible to ignore. If the pain is on the inner side but a few inches below the joint line, on the shin bone itself, the problem may be in a bursa. Bursae are fluid-filled sacs that reduce friction between tissues. The pes anserine bursa sits where 3 tendons attach to the shin bone. When this bursa becomes inflamed, often from overuse or from the mechanics of walking, it produces pain in that lower spot. It is more common in women and in those carrying extra weight, both of which alter the angles and forces through the inner knee. Pain on the outer side of the knee often involves the iliotibial band, a long band of fascia running from the hip to the shin. As the knee bends and straightens, this band slides over a bony prominence on the outer side of the joint. In some people, the friction becomes excessive. The band and the underlying tissues become irritated. The pain is sharp and localized to the outer knee, often coming on after a certain distance of walking or running. There may be a sensation of snapping or clicking as the band moves over the bone. Pain behind the knee has fewer common causes, but they are distinct. A strain of the popliteus muscle, a small muscle deep in the back of the knee, produces pain in the very fold of the joint. A calf strain, involving the muscles that attach just above the knee, produces pain slightly lower down, often worsening when rising onto the toes. And a Baker's cyst, a collection of joint fluid that has been pushed out of the main joint space, produces a visible or palpable lump behind the knee. This cyst may vary in size, sometimes enlarging with activity and shrinking with rest. Each of these patterns is a clue. Each location tells a story about what the body has been doing, what it has been tolerating, and what it now needs. Learning to read these clues does not replace professional evaluation, but it does transform the experience of the body from something mysterious and frightening into something comprehensible and manageable. Part 4. The principles that endure. Beyond the specifics of anatomy and diagnosis, there are broader principles that apply to nearly every aspect of aging well. These principles emerge from observing the longest-lived populations, from studying the biology of aging, and from understanding how the body responds to stress and recovery over time. The principle of mechanical load. Biological tissues are living things. They respond to the demands placed upon them. This is true of muscle, which grows stronger when challenged. It is true of bone, which becomes denser when subjected to weight-bearing stress. It is true of cartilage, which requires movement to receive nutrition. And it is true of tendons and ligaments, which adapt to the forces they must transmit. The corollary is also true. Tissues that are not challenged become weaker. Muscle that is not used atrophies. Bone that is not loaded loses density. Cartilage that is not moved does not receive the fluid exchange it needs to stay healthy. The body operates on a use it or lose it principle, and this principle does not retire at 50 or 60 or 70. The challenge is finding the appropriate load. Too little, and the tissues weaken. Too much, and they break down. The sweet spot is the dose of stress that stimulates adaptation without causing damage. This is not a fixed number. It changes with time, with conditioning, with the health of the tissues. It requires attention and adjustment. It requires listening to the signals. The principle of recovery. Stress without recovery is not adaptation. It is breakdown. The body repairs itself during rest, during sleep, during the hours between demands. This is when muscle protein is synthesized, when microdamage is patched, when inflammation resolves. With age, recovery becomes slower and more important. The same workout that required a day of recovery at 30 may require 2 or 3 days at 60. This is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of wisdom to respect the body's changed timeline. Pushing through pain, ignoring the need for rest, treating recovery as optional rather than essential. These are strategies that lead not to strength but to injury. The principle of specificity. The body adapts specifically to the demands placed upon it. Walking strengthens the muscles used in walking. It does little for the muscles used in climbing, or lifting, or balancing. A well-rounded approach to physical activity must include variety, must challenge the body in multiple planes of motion, must address strength and flexibility and endurance and coordination. This is particularly important as the body ages, because the activities of daily life require all of these capacities. Getting out of a chair requires leg strength and balance. Carrying groceries requires grip strength and core stability. Stepping off a curb requires ankle mobility and reaction time. If the body has only been trained for one type of demand, it will be unprepared for the others. The principle of gradual progression. The body does not respond well to sudden, dramatic increases in demand. This is true at any age, but the consequences become more severe with time. A rapid jump in running mileage, an abrupt attempt to lift heavier weights, a sudden immersion in a new activity. These are recipes for injury. The tissues need time to adapt. Tendons, in particular, adapt slowly. They may require weeks or months to strengthen in response to increased load. Pushing them faster than they can respond leads not to strength, but to breakdown. The principle of gradual progression is simply patience translated into action. The principle of movement variety. The human body was designed to move in many ways. To walk and run. To climb and squat. To twist and reach. To lift and carry. Modern life tends to reduce this variety. We sit in chairs, walk on flat surfaces, perform the same limited range of motions day after day. This repetition creates predictable patterns of stress. The same tissues are loaded in the same ways, while others are never used at all. Over decades, this leads to imbalances. Some structures become tight, others weak. Some are overused, others underused. The joints suffer from this lack of variety, moving only through partial ranges, never experiencing the full mobility they were designed for. Introducing variety is not complicated. It means changing positions throughout the day. It means walking on different surfaces. It means incorporating movements that challenge the body in unfamiliar ways. It means using the full range of motion that the joints are capable of, not just the limited range that daily life requires. Part 5. The role of the muscles in joint health. The joints are often blamed for pain, but the muscles deserve equal attention. Every joint in the body is surrounded by muscles that control its movement and absorb the forces passing through it. When those muscles are strong and balanced, the joint is protected. When they are weak or imbalanced, the joint takes the brunt of the stress. Consider the knee, the quadriceps, hamstrings, and calf muscles all cross the knee joint. They are the first line of defense against excessive force. When the quadriceps are weak, the patellofemoral joint must absorb more of the load during bending activities. When the hamstrings are tight or weak, the forces on the knee during walking and running are altered. When the muscles of the hip are weak, the knee may collapse inward during weight-bearing, placing stress on the inner structures. The relationship between the hip and the knee is particularly important and often overlooked. The hip abductors, the muscles that move the leg out to the side, control the position of the thigh during walking. When these muscles are weak, the thigh rotates inward, the knee tracks poorly, and the inner knee is stressed. Many cases of inner knee pain that appear to be joint problems are actually hip problems manifesting at the knee. This is not a new insight, but it is one that is easy to forget when the pain is in the knee and the hip feels fine. The body is connected. It operates as an integrated system, not a collection of independent parts. Treating the knee without considering the hip, the ankle, the foot, is like fixing a squeak in a machine without looking at the gears that drive it. The muscles also serve as shock absorbers. Each time the foot strikes the ground, a force travels up the leg. Strong muscles can absorb much of this force, dissipating it through eccentric contraction before it reaches the joints. Weak muscles allow that force to transmit directly to the cartilage and bone. Over thousands of steps, this difference accumulates. Maintaining muscle strength is not about appearance. It is not about lifting impressive weights or achieving a certain physique. It is about preserving the body's natural shock absorption system, about keeping the muscles capable of doing the job they were designed to do. This requires consistent effort, but it does not require extraordinary effort. Simple, regular challenges to the muscles, performed with good form and appropriate load, are enough to maintain function. Part 6. The metabolic context. The joints do not exist in isolation from the rest of the body. They are affected by the same metabolic processes that influence every other tissue. Inflammation, blood sugar regulation, hormonal balance. All of these play a role in joint health. Chronic, low-grade inflammation is now understood to be a feature of many age-related conditions. This is not the acute inflammation of an injury, with its redness and swelling and heat. It is a smoldering, systemic inflammation that arises from multiple sources. Poor diet, excess body fat, lack of exercise, chronic stress, inadequate sleep, all can contribute to this inflammatory state. When the body is inflamed, the joints suffer. The synovial lining of the joint can become irritated. The cartilage may break down more quickly. The pain signals may be amplified. This is why two people with identical joint changes on X-ray can have completely different experiences of pain. The inflammation level in the body modulates the perception of joint discomfort. Blood sugar regulation is another factor. High blood sugar levels can lead to the formation of advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. These are compounds formed when sugar molecules attach to proteins or fats. In the joints, AGEs can accumulate in collagen, making tissues stiffer and more brittle. The cartilage loses some of its resilience. The tendons become less elastic. This is a chemical change, not just a mechanical one, and it is influenced by what we eat. Body weight, of course, affects the joints directly. Each pound of body weight adds roughly 3 to 4 pounds of force across the knee during walking. During stair climbing, the force is even higher. Excess weight is not just extra mass to carry. It is extra force transmitted through the joints with every step. But beyond the mechanical effect, fat tissue itself is metabolically active. It produces inflammatory signals. It contributes to the systemic inflammation that affects joint health. The relationship between metabolism and joint health is not a simple one. It is not about achieving perfect numbers or following a rigid protocol. It is about understanding that the joints are part of the whole. That what benefits the body metabolically also benefits the joints. A diet that reduces inflammation, stabilizes blood sugar, and supports healthy body weight is a diet that supports joint health. The specific choices matter less than the overall pattern. Part 7. The environmental dimension. The body exists in an environment that shapes it in countless ways. The surfaces we walk on, the shoes we wear, the chairs we sit in, the air we breathe, all of these interact with the body over time. Walking on hard, unyielding surfaces, for example, changes the forces that travel through the legs. Concrete and asphalt transmit more shock than soil or wood. Over years, this may influence joint health. This is not to say that everyone must walk only on soft surfaces, but awareness of the cumulative effect can inform choices. Alternating surfaces, wearing shoes with appropriate cushioning, paying attention to how the body feels after different activities. These are small adjustments that can have long-term benefits. Footwear deserves particular attention. The foot is the foundation of the kinetic chain. What happens at the foot affects the ankle, the knee, the hip, the back. Shoes that alter natural foot mechanics, that provide too much support or too little, that change the angle of the foot relative to the ground. These can have upstream effects. The ideal shoe for one person may not be ideal for another. The key is awareness, paying attention to how the body responds to different footwear. Choosing shoes that support natural movement rather than forcing the foot into an unnatural position. The chairs we sit in also matter. Prolonged sitting in poorly designed chairs can shorten the hip flexors, weaken the glutes, and alter the mechanics of standing and walking. The body adapts to the positions it is placed in most frequently. If those positions are less than ideal, the adaptations will be less than ideal. This is not an argument against sitting. It is an argument for varying positions, for standing periodically, for choosing chairs that support rather than constrain. Temperature and weather are often mentioned by those with joint pain. Many people notice that their joints ache before rain or during cold spells. This is not imagination. Changes in barometric pressure can affect the pressure within the joints, potentially irritating sensitive tissues. Cold temperatures can increase the viscosity of joint fluid, making movement feel stiffer. The practical response is not to control the weather, but to adjust expectations and responses. On days when joints feel stiffer, gentler movement, more warm-up, perhaps different activities. Working with the body's response to environment rather than fighting it. Part 8. The psychological dimension. The relationship between mind and body in the experience of pain is profound and often underestimated. Pain is not simply a signal from the tissues. It is a perception constructed by the brain based on multiple inputs. The state of the tissues matters, but so does attention, expectation, fear, and context. When pain is interpreted as threatening, the body responds by tensing muscles, altering movement patterns, and amplifying the pain signal. This is a protective response, but it can become self-perpetuating. The fear of pain leads to guarded movement. Guarded movement leads to altered mechanics. Altered mechanics lead to new stresses. New stresses lead to more pain. The cycle reinforces itself. Breaking this cycle requires a shift in interpretation. Pain that is understood as a signal rather than a catastrophe, as information rather than damage, is less threatening. The body can relax. Movement can be more natural. The amplification of the pain signal can diminish. This is not to suggest that pain is imagined. The tissue issues are real. But the experience of pain is always a combination of the physical and the psychological. Addressing only one side of this equation is incomplete. Attention to the mental and emotional aspects of pain, to the stories we tell ourselves about what the pain means, to the fear that may be driving protective responses. This is as legitimate as attention to the physical structures. For those over 50, there is often an additional layer. The appearance of pain can trigger fears about aging, about decline, about loss of function. These fears are understandable, but they can also be counterproductive. They can lead to avoidance of activity, which leads to weakness, which leads to more pain. The narrative matters. The interpretation matters. The way we hold our pain in consciousness matters. Part 9. The wisdom of slowing down. One of the gifts of aging, if it can be received, is the permission to slow down. Not to stop, not to become sedentary, but to move with more attention, more intention, more presence. The young body can be careless. It can push through, ignore signals, recover from almost anything. The older body demands a different relationship. This slowing down is not a loss. It is an evolution. It is the difference between driving fast on a road you do not know and walking slowly on a road you have traveled many times. The walking reveals details the driving missed. The slowing allows appreciation of what is there. In movement, this means warming up properly before activity. It means starting slowly, allowing the tissues to gradually accommodate to the demands being placed on them. It means paying attention to form, to alignment, to the subtle sensations that indicate whether a movement is helpful or harmful. It means stopping before pain becomes sharp, before fatigue becomes exhaustion. In daily life, this means building transitions into the day. Time between activities. Time to shift from sitting to standing, from activity to rest. The body does not respond well to abrupt changes. It prefers gradual transitions. Time to adjust, building this time into the day, protecting it from the pressure to do more. is a form of respect for the body's needs. In recovery, this means honoring the need for rest, not seeing rest as weakness, as time wasted, as something to be minimized. Seeing rest as essential, as the time when the body does its repair work, as the partner to activity rather than its enemy. The quality of rest matters. Sleep, in particular, is when much of the body's maintenance work occurs. Protecting sleep, prioritizing it, creating conditions for it, these are not indulgences. They are necessities. Part 10. The integration of knowledge. Understanding the body's signals. Knowing the principles that govern tissue health. Recognizing the interconnectedness of systems. These are pieces of knowledge. But knowledge alone does not change outcomes. It must be integrated into daily life, into the small decisions that accumulate over weeks and months and years. Integration means applying the principle of mechanical load to the choice of activity. It means choosing movements that challenge the body appropriately, not too little and not too much. It means varying those movements to ensure balanced development. It means paying attention to how the body responds and adjusting accordingly. Integration means applying the principle of recovery to the structure of the week. It means building rest days into activity schedules. It means ensuring adequate sleep. It means recognizing that the body's capacity for work is not infinite and respecting its limits. Integration means applying the principle of metabolic health to food choices. It means eating in a way that minimizes inflammation, stabilizes blood sugar, and supports healthy body weight. It means understanding that food is not just fuel but information, signaling to the body's systems how they should operate. Integration means applying the principle of environmental awareness to daily habits. It means choosing surfaces and footwear thoughtfully. It means varying positions throughout the day. It means paying attention to how the environment affects the body and making adjustments where possible. Integration means applying the principle of psychological awareness to the experience of pain. It means observing the stories told about pain, the fears attached to it, the interpretations placed upon it. It means cultivating a relationship with pain that is curious rather than fearful, attentive rather than avoidant. None of this is complicated, but it is not simple either. It requires ongoing attention. It requires the willingness to learn from the body, to adjust based on its feedback, to treat the relationship with the body as a continuous conversation rather than a one-time fix. Part 11. The long view. The body that carries us through life is the only body we have. It has been with us through every joy and every sorrow, every triumph and every setback. It has healed from injuries, recovered from illnesses, adapted to changes we never asked for. It has been remarkably forgiving. As the decades pass, the body asks for something in return. Not perfection, not endless effort, not constant vigilance. Just attention, just respect, just the willingness to listen to its signals and respond with wisdom rather than fear. The knee that aches on stairs is not broken. It is communicating. The hip that stiffens after sitting is not failing. It is requesting movement. The back that protests heavy lifting is not weak. It is asking for better mechanics. The body is always speaking. The question is whether we are listening. Those who live longest and best in the places studied by researchers do not obsess over their health. They do not follow complicated protocols or chase the latest interventions. They move naturally throughout the day. They eat real food in moderate amounts. They maintain connections to others. They have a sense of purpose. They do not worry excessively about aging. They simply live. And in living, they accumulate the years. This is not an accident. It is the natural outcome of a life lived in alignment with the body's needs. The body does not ask for much. It asks for movement, for nourishment, for rest, for connection. It asks to be used, but not abused. Challenged, but not overwhelmed. Attended to, but not obsessed over. The wisdom of the body is available to anyone who chooses to listen. It speaks in the language of sensation, of comfort and discomfort, of ease and effort. It speaks in the patterns of pain and relief, of stiffness and mobility, of fatigue and energy. Learning this language takes time, but the time is going to pass anyway. The question is whether it will pass in conversation with the body or in opposition to it. Part 12. A grounded perspective. There is no magic in aging well. There is no secret formula, no hidden knowledge, no intervention that will stop time. There is only the patient work of attending to the body, of learning its language, of responding to its needs. This work is not exciting. It does not make for dramatic headlines, but it is the work that matters. The body will continue to change. This is inevitable. Joints will show their age. Muscles will require more effort to maintain. Recovery will take longer. These are not failures. They are facts. The question is not whether change will occur, but how we will respond to it. Will we respond with fear, with avoidance, with desperate attempts to reverse what cannot be reversed? Or will we respond with acceptance, with adaptation, with the quiet determination to make the best of what is? The answer to this question determines more than any specific intervention. It determines the quality of the relationship with the body, and the quality of that relationship determines, to a remarkable degree, the quality of the years. The longest-lived peoples do not live long because they have discovered something hidden. They live long because they have avoided the things that shorten life and embraced the things that sustain it. They move. They eat. They rest. They connect. They do not overcomplicate it. They simply live in a way that the body can sustain. This is the model. Not a program to follow. Not a protocol to complete, but a way of being to cultivate. A way that respects the body's signals. A way that adapts to the body's changes. A way that finds satisfaction in movement, nourishment in food, restoration in rest. A way that does not fight aging but accompanies it with grace. The body has been carrying us forward for decades. It deserves this accompaniment. It deserves attention without obsession, care without fear, respect without submission. It deserves to be heard. In the end, the wisdom of the body is simple. It asks only what it has always asked. Movement, nourishment, rest, connection, purpose. These are not secrets. They are not new. They are as old as humanity itself, and they remain, after all these years, the most reliable guide to living well. The body speaks. It has always spoken. Learning to listen is not a task to complete, but a practice to continue. A practice that deepens with time, that rewards attention, that transforms the experience of aging from something to be feared into something to be inhabited fully, with curiosity and respect and a quiet appreciation for all the body has done and all it continues to do. The body has been carrying us forward for decades, through every joy and every hardship, every triumph and every quiet, ordinary day. It has asked for remarkably little in return. Only attention, only respect, only the willingness to listen when it speaks. The language it uses is not complicated. It is the language of sensation, of ease and effort, of comfort and discomfort, of the small signals that arise when something needs to shift. Learning to read that language does not stop time, but it changes the experience of time. It transforms aging from something that happens to us into something we participate in. If this conversation has stirred something in you, if it has opened a different way of seeing what the body is saying, we would be honored to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if the idea of building a personal library of this wisdom appeals to you, we invite you to explore the other volumes here and to subscribe so that new chapters find their way to you. This is the Longevity Library. Listen, learn, and live longer.